From KVUE News in Austin, you're watching Texas This Week with Ashley Goodo.
Good Sunday morning. Tensions are rising under the Pink Dome as lawmakers wait for the opposite chamber to pass its bills. Let's get to the three things you need to know in Texas politics. While you expect differences between Democrats and Republicans in the Texas Capitol, there are also stark differences between the chambers, especially when it comes to priority legislation. For the House, criminal justice reform was at the top of the agenda this session, but dozens of bills the members passed are just sitting in the Senate. Thursday, Plano Republican Jeff Leach called out the Senate in this tweet, writing in part, quote, "If the Texas Senate wants to kill or sit on important bills sent over by the House, they can expect the same in return, starting today." As a wise House colleague once said, the Senate can respect us or expect us. A few hours later, Representative Leach took the back mic on the House floor to talk about deadlines for the House to pass Senate bills, the procedure to kill Senate bills, and the inaction on House priorities.
House Bill 275, authored by Speaker Pro-Tem Moody with joint authors Sinfronia Thompson, Murr, Chairwoman Collier, and Jeff Leach, a bill that was passed 145-2 out of this House, was voted down and killed in the Senate Criminal Jurisprudence Committee.
And some Democrats backed him up.
Is there anything in the House rules or the Constitution that requires the House to pass any more Senate bills this session?
It's more than just talk. Representative Leach moved for the House to recess until Sunday afternoon, a move that will give the House less time to pass Senate bills. And the message seemed to be received. Friday, the Senate started moving some of the House's criminal justice bills. If passing bills wasn't creating enough tension between the chambers, add in the state budget. Lawmakers reached a deal on Senate Bill 1 Friday and reportedly took out a key provision added by the House to require the legislature's approval to spend billions of dollars in federal COVID relief funding. The budget is the only bill lawmakers are required by the state constitution to pass during the session. Governor Greg Abbott is seemingly trying to mend the divide, writing to lawmakers Thursday, quote, "As everybody knows, I will be calling a special session for redistricting in the fall. I will place the allocation of the nearly $16 billion in coronavirus state fiscal recovery relief federal funds on the same special call so the entire legislature can participate in the allocation process in a way that best serves all Texans," end quote. Texas now has one of the strictest abortion laws in the country. Governor Greg Abbott signed Senate Bill 8, the Texas Heartbeat Act, into law this week.
The life of every unborn child who has a heartbeat will be saved from the ravages of abortion.
The legislation bans doctors and healthcare providers from performing abortions after a fetal heartbeat is detected. There is not an exception for victims of rape or incest, only if there is a medical emergency. The reason this is considered a near ban on all abortions is because a heartbeat is typically detected at 6 weeks gestation. The gestation period starts on the first day of a woman's last menstrual cycle before pregnancy, about 2 weeks before she's even conceived the child, which is why most women don't know they're pregnant until after 6 weeks, at which time they will no longer be allowed to get an abortion in Texas. The law goes into effect September 1st. We are now 8 days away from Sine Die, the end of the 87th Texas legislative session. Speaker Pro-Tem Representative Joe Moody joined me to talk about the temperature of the session and the priority legislation Democrats couldn't get across the finish line. Representative Moody, thank you so much for taking some time to chat with us today.
Thank you very much.
You know, I want you to talk to us about your overall thoughts on this session.
Well, I think this session has been quite strange and unique. We didn't know what to expect. We were coming into session in the middle of a pandemic, and then we had Winter Storm Uri that threw most of the state into another crisis. So all those things layered in, really created some complexity for us that we've never seen before. We changed the entirety of the House rules just to be able to accommodate navigating through a pandemic. So, and those first 60 days where we were almost just kind of non-existent here at the Capitol to make sure that we didn't have a spread event, those are usually 60 days that are utilized building relationships and working through problems and getting over hurdles. And you got to put that on top of the fact that we didn't have a real interim where some of that work is done too. And we had a very contentious election in 2020. And so all those things added up to creating a very, I think, very strange dynamic during session, some of which we're still seeing even in these late stages of session.
What were you most looking forward to be able to passing that, at this point with 1 week left, it doesn't look like it's going to happen?
When we walked in the building, we wanted to see some expansion of access to health care. Now, broad Medicaid expansion is something that certainly does not look like it's going to happen at this point, but there are some very positive efforts on our side of the aisle to address maternal mortality, also to address children's health insurance. And so those are still very much alive and moving around in the Senate, and those could very, very much land on the governor's desk. So those are big things for the Democratic caucus and for the minority party. Also, there are a number of criminal justice reform and police reform bills that are still floating around with a significant amount of life left. The House voted out 73 different criminal justice reform bills this session, which I think is monumental. But again, that's great, but we want to make sure we get them to the governor's desk, and there is certainly still some opportunity to do that. So, I think the challenges that we faced, certainly, and being from El Paso is very pronounced to me, and passing permitless carry, and that's kind of still hanging in the balance. I don't know where it's going to land, but I think that's a very dangerous bill, and I don't think it's something that we should have spent any time on this session. We've also seen some very aggressive encroachment into voter access, our access to the ballot box, and so those are things that I would have thought we could have avoided and gotten to the the more serious issues of our day.
There were several bills that the Democrats really, fought hard to try and stop. Of course, there's still a little bit more time left, but was there something in particular? I know you mentioned permitless carry. You mentioned SB 7, which, we're waiting on to see what happens. Senate Bill 8 was another big one. Was there one in particular that you personally, just didn't want to see pass?
Well, given the experience that we had in El Paso during the interim and the tragedy that came to our community, I certainly wanted to see more of an effort to pass gun safety measures, and what we saw instead was 180 degrees the opposite. We were able to pass what's called Lion Try. Senator Blanco from El Paso and Representative Guerin from Tarrant County teamed up to pass that bill, and we passed it out of the House last week, and so that is a win on gun safety. But I think we obviously could have gone further. There were a lot more issues that had consensus around them. So that one certainly is one that sticks out in my mind. I think we had a debate, certainly a debate on the SB 8. We were able to, the minority party was able to kind of narrow the focus of that bill. Certainly still something that the caucus broadly opposed, but perhaps the impact in the real world will not be as profound, as compared to what the bill looked like when it came to the floor. And it remains to be seen what happens with SB 7 that's in conference committee right now. And hopefully there are ways that we can continue to minimize the harm of that bill.
One of the biggest changes in the House is the new Speaker. Talk to us about the leadership style of Speaker Phelan, your thoughts on him as a Speaker.
Well, I think the Speaker, no matter who the Speaker is, they have a very big challenge because they're different from any other state leader, because they have to look to the body, to the Texas House, to elect them. Right? They are elected by a group of members from across the state, and unlike Washington D.C., that means building coalitions between both sides of the aisle. So maybe looks easy from a distance, but I know it's very complicated. And so, there are some very conservative items that we saw come across the House floor that we fought tooth and nail, and obviously didn't want to see there. But we've also seen, some very strong healthcare measures, and a lot, like I said, over 73 bills that are criminal justice reform, and a Speaker who has elevated criminal justice reform to a place it's never been elevated to before. So, I said this in the beginning when Speaker Phelan appointed me to serve as his Speaker Pro Tem, is that I respect him. I understand that we're not in the same party and we're not going to agree on a lot of things, but he's always been willing to figure out the places we can agree and to amplify policy areas that can be wins for all of us. And I think that's important. When building a coalition, you have to be able to understand both sides of the aisle, and I think that he certainly earnestly tried to do that.
The session ends May 31st. That's Texas This Week.